What's going on, friends? I haven't posted a video in about 2 weeks, but since then I have purchased a DR650. Look at it. Isn't it pretty? It was brand new. I'm gonna do a little bit of a ride today and talk about some of the things that I've done. Um, Not really gonna be able to see this while I'm riding, but note, Lex Systems exhaust. I don't know if it's systems or not, but oh well. Let's get going. This adjusted. Okay, so this is a 2024 Suzuki DR650, and I'm very much liking it. I traded it in for my DRZ 400 just because I wanted something just a little bit more power and highway ability. My general justification for getting it. I'm very happy with it so far. It's super polite. I'm gonna say polite. It's easy to just go around town. I've been dailying it to and from work, which is really, really nice because it gets like around 50 miles to the gallon. I don't really have a good number yet just because I kind of fill it up intermittently in between tanks of fuel, but somewhere around 130 to 150 is what I've been getting since I did the some of the mods, which I will talk about soon. The best thing about these mods is it lets me do things like this. It'll do that all day. This is a pretty okay one. But I love doing wheelies. That was one of the things I thought that I was going to miss most with switching bikes from the DRZ 400 to the DR650. I'm not sure how well it'd do dumb stuff like that. But it does it. Okay, so let's talk about some of the mods that I've done so far. They are not very extensive because I have only had it for about 2.5 weeks. But we had the slip-on that I showed earlier, the little Lex slip-on. It's cool because it has they say it's tunable, but really you can just take the baffle out, which is nice. It quiets it up just a little bit, so if you are doing like off-road or anything like that, you're not going to get pulled over by the, I don't even know what you call them, wildlife marshals. One of those things. Oh, I'm still on reserve. Let me fix that real quick. So yes, it is a spark arrestor and a baffle, which is good. It's like 250 bucks, so fairly good investment, I think. Outside of that, drilled a 2-inch hole in the airbox, just a little more air pass through, which is good. And then I put in a DynoJet jet kit, which had to do a little bit of tuning with that. They recommend with the aftermarket exhaust, even a slip-on, that you run the 160 main jet, which DynoJet has their own numbering for the way jets are that are away from standard, so they recommend a 160. Threw a 155 on this because it ended up being way too rich with the slip-on, and everything has been good so far. Outside of that, so we got the airbox mod with the 2-inch hole. We got the jet kit with the 155 main jet. The jet kit also included a more tapered throttle needle, which is definitely helping it off of idle some. In addition, some of the things that I've read online and have done to the bike is drilling a second hole in the bottom of the vacuum slide just to get it to fly up a little more quickly and act a little bit more like a pumper card from what I'm told. And the final thing is the vacuum slide spring. It's stock like 114 centimeters, and I cut it down to I think 100, and that just lets it again come up a little bit quicker, and it is less aggressive coming back down. don't necessarily know what all of those do just yet, but it is working just fine and very much liking it. So that's a list of the mods. I'm not doing this in any particular order. I'm just trying to kind of talk about the bike a little bit since I haven't made a video yet. Can't see very well right now because of the sun and the glare and whatnot. Okay, that's a little bit better. Let's talk about the ride and like the position. It's very much like a dirt bike, not dissimilar to the DRZ400. It is slightly more comfortable just because the seat's a little bit wider, but it is still a dirt bike seat, so your nether regions will go to sleep at some point if you're riding this for long enough. I have like a 30-minute commute to work every day, and it happens just about every day. So, for the long haul, definitely would consider getting a softer seat. It is relatively tall. I don't know the exact specs on seat height, but again, comparable to like a DRZ 400. I am about 5'10" and cannot flat foot either side. Can kind of be like on the balls of my feet at a standstill with both feet down. That's fine. It's more than enough control. I'm never worried about dropping it or anything like that at stoplights. Brakes. We can talk about brakes. I will say that they are adequate. They're not particularly good. They're not particularly bad. They're comparable to what you would find on the DRZ 400. Maybe not quite as good, but it is a little bit lighter than this bike is. A far and away better than KLR 650 brakes. Mainly speaking to like the newest generation of KLR 650. I had one of those for about 6 months and just did not like it very much, which is, I was a little bit skeptical with purchasing this one, just because, you know, I ended up trading the KLR in pretty quick. It didn't have a lot of power, it was heavy, the brakes were not good, there was just nothing really spectacular about it in my opinion. But this one is just fun. It's super fun. It's way more powerful. It's like 150 pounds lighter than the KLR was. Brakes are better. It's still carbureted. Wasn't the biggest fan of the fuel injection on the KLR. It wasn't bad. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just there's something about that direct feel you get from a carburetor that's going right into a cable. I'm gonna be quiet for a second while I navigate this intersection because people do dumb stuff and don't turn on their signal and all kinds of other things. Come on. There we go. See? No signal. Naughty, naughty. I don't know if you can hear the bike at all right now. This is with the baffle in. But let's continue talking about some of the features of it. So we talked about brakes. Somewhere around 40 horsepower, and I would imagine very similar in foot-pound of torque. But it will do 100% do highway, freeway speeds all day. Can confirm. I rode it all the way out to like Smyrna, which is like 40 minutes away from where I live, at like 75 or 80. No problem the other day. Whee! Suspension is so soft. It is very, very soft, even compared to the DRZ 400. It was the SM model, so I believe that means that the suspension was slightly upgraded from the S model. But this is very soft, very plushy, pretty comfortable for the street, but I have taken it off-road and it is like, yeah, I'm concerned about bottoming out just about everywhere. The things that I've listed already are the only things I've done. It definitely needs a like bash guard, skid plate thing, probably some crash bars before I go do any more off-road type things, just so I don't end up ripping any of the very important bits out, like drain plugs. So those are all things to come, along with 1 1/8 bars. These are the 7/8 right now, and they're super duper flimsy. I did end up dropping it in the mud while I was out off-roading the other day, and I had like a mini heart attack because I thought the bars were gonna bend. They're not flimsy by any means. You just obviously get way more diameter with the fat bar setup. Let's see, what else to talk about? No wind protection, obviously, so it is very noisy in your helmet. And like my setup right now, I have my GoPro hanging from the bottom of my helmet, and like I'm just catching all kinds of air with that. So for like long range touring, I would 100% recommend, and probably will be getting a taller windscreen, or windscreen at all, just to kind of mitigate that a little bit. What else do I like? What else don't I like? Super pretty. I have never had a white motorcycle before, and I think that's pretty cool. It's white and blue. They make like the black and orange one, I think, still, but I was just in the showroom and looking at them, and I was like, oh, the white one's nice and pretty. Talk a little bit more about it. So I mentioned it is a 2024. It is still carbureted. It has no electronic aids, no ABS, no traction control, ride modes, definitely not adjustable suspension. None of the frills and farkles. It is just a motorcycle in the most archaic sort of way. It's awesome. I have an analog tachometer with a trip meter that you still have to wind over. It is totally a blast from the past. And I think that's cool. Like I mentioned earlier, there's something about the throttle feel that is just very visceral. You just feel everything. Like you're in direct control of what the motor is doing, and that's a very good feeling. The suspension, as mentioned before, is so soft, it just feels kind of vague. You're not exactly entirely sure what your wheels are doing at any given moment, but it is good enough to not injure yourself when you go over a bump. That's how we'll phrase it. I have taken a passenger on the back with this, and it had no problems with it at all, and that is with all the stock settings. So prior to me doing any of the engine and or fueling things, I am gonna go because I don't want to get stuck behind that guy. Brap. I do love that it kind of pops and crackles every time you get off the throttle. I do think I'm running just a little bit on the rich side, which is fine with me. I'd rather have it be rich than lean. If you're watching this for any like setup tips, and you go with the dyno jet setting, it says to do the 2 screws out, but a lot of the information online says to go like 1.5, 1 1/4. Stick with the 2 screws out if you have a similar setup to me. I just don't really like the idea of running leaner. So 2 screws out on the mixed screw at the bottom of the carburetor. One other thing to note about all that is that there is a brass plug that covers the fuel mix screw stock. So if you have one of these brand new off the showroom floor, you can't make any adjustments to that unless you kind of unscrew the carburetor to the point where it's loose and swing it out, and then you just take a little drill bit and then drill the whole thing out, revealing the fuel mix screw. That's important because off the showroom floor, these are set up very, very lean. I don't know if that's to try and comply with current emission standards. That's what the working theory is, at least, with it being a carbureted bike and not being updated since 1990 something, which is almost as old as I am. Another novelty that I think is very cool about this bike. But getting back to the point, just make sure that you're adjusting that mixed screw, because it just is starving for fuel and air when you first get them. We can talk about the tires. So I believe these are the trail wings, and they are perfectly fine for the street. I don't feel any loss of confidence going around the neighborhood or freeway or anything else. Where you're going to notice that these are not good all around tires is definitely in the mud and like slick, sort of cakey surfaces, so mud. I took it out last weekend to Rockmart, Georgia, and there's a little place called Iron Stab OHV Park, and it had rained, I believe, like 2 days prior to me going there, and oh my god, every time I would hit a muddy spot, I thought I was gonna die. Like, you just lose all feeling in the front, and the rear, if you even look at the throttle, it just spins up like crazy. So if you plan on doing lots of off-roading with your DR650, definitely change the tires. I think it would be fine for gravel or like hard packed dirt, but for mud, oh my god, you're gonna crash. And I did drop the bike. I think I mentioned that earlier. When I was in the mud, everything was okay. I didn't bend the bars. I didn't bend the clutch lever. I did bend my shift lever, which is kind of a bummer. It just went up a couple millimeters, so I just removed it and like rotated it one spline counterclockwise, and it's almost in the same spot. So not really any harm done there. Overall impressions, I love it. It's perfect for just a daily commute. You could tour on it. It's fun to take off-road. It's like, as a lot of people say, like a jack of all trades. There's this kind of pulse on the zeitgeist saying that if you had to have one bike, what would it be? It would be a DR650. I am prescribing to that opinion more and more the more that I ride it. You're not going to be setting any lap records for sure around a track, or any track, road or off-road. But it's just polite, it's easy to manage, it's not aggressive, it's really not going to get away from you with 40 horsepower and 40 foot-pound of torque. You can take a passenger. I get it to go get groceries, good on gas, it's super cheap to insure. There's a lot of people that go through, what in the heck are you doing? And try to build like lightweight adventure bikes out of it, and I 100% believe that you could, if you threw some fat bars on it and the windscreen and the crash bars and maybe geared it up just a little bit to not be so buzzy on the highway. You'd 100% do it. That and the maintenance is so easy to do. I did just hit my break-in period at 600 miles yesterday, so I spent the early part of this morning changing the oil and filter and checking the chain slack, lubing the chain, all the good things that you do. But I know that coming, relatively soon, because it is a oil-cooled single-cylinder bike, is you're going to have to do a valve adjustment. And the really cool thing about this, from what I understand, is that it's a screw-type valve rather than a shim-type. So you can just make the adjustment with a screw and then measure it and make sure it's within your tolerance, and it's good to go. One thing that might be kind of surprising is the service intervals for like oil changes. It's 3,500 miles as opposed to like a lot of bikes are 7,000, 6,000, 7,000. It's pretty standard from my experience. So you're going to be changing oil a little bit more frequently, which is totally understandable. There's not a whole lot of oil because there's not a whole lot of engine, and there's a little itty bitty oil filter in there. So I'm going to do it every 3,500 miles. I don't care what anybody says. I replaced the oil today with Mobil 1 1040 full synthetic, and it feels pretty good. It feels like ever so slightly better. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. If you have any tips for me or want to know anything more about what I've done or plan on doing, let me know. Gladly respond. But I am on my way to go get some dinner. I'm going to stop by the grocery store and see what I can whip up. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you. Appreciate you watching. See you soon.